Is back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes!
The center back, Jacob Glesnes, is going for it.
Oh my God! What a goal! And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And yeah, what a disappointing day it was for Philadelphia Union fans as the Union draw against Montreal 1-1. 7th draw now all time at home against Montreal, which is just a huge disappointment. The worst game, in my opinion, this season for the Union. I know that they've lost in Toronto, and I know you had that draw at home against Minnesota, but I think yesterday's game against Montreal was the worst game of the season by far. Before we get into the news, before we get into that game, talking about, who were some of the star players for the Union, which I don't know about you guys, but it was really, really hard to pick out who played well yesterday for the Union and blunder of the week and then breaking down the goals. I do want to say, again, I know I said at the end of the episode when I was live on Twitter Spaces, thanking Ricky Zelfer, Ed Fagan for coming on Spaces, previewing that Montreal game. And again, I just want to say thank you to those guys for coming on and talking about the Montreal game. And I just want to say, maybe 7 o'clock on a Thursday wasn't the best time to do that. I saw a lot of people retweeting, a lot of people liking the tweets. So I was like, okay, we might have a lot of people come on and give their thoughts on the Union season and whatnot. And, that was not the case. So for people that, wanted to show up and, maybe work or something else got into the way, we will for sure go live on Twitter Spaces here in a couple weeks. So if that's something you guys are interested in, look out for that on Twitter at Free Kick Pod. I'll be posting about that, like I said, in a couple of weeks. I'm thinking maybe 8 o'clock next time we'll try. Maybe that gives time to people to finish eating. If you got kids, maybe you're starting to put your kids in bed. So we'll try 8 o'clock instead of 7 p.m. next time we go live on Twitter Spaces. And if that doesn't work, then maybe we go a little bit later. But definitely want to do Twitter Spaces again. A lot of fun talking to you guys and just hearing your thoughts on the Union. But like I said, we have a lot of news, a lot of thoughts for this game against Montreal. So let's just go straight into the news. So, first off, I'm sure, a lot of these news points that I'm going to bring up, I'm sure you guys saw during the week. But if not, that's why I talk about them here on the podcast. So, first off, we have Gysai Zardes getting traded to Colorado Rapids from the Columbus Crew for an initial fee of $300,000 in 2022 GAM, though that amount can go up to $1.4 million in GAM if incentives are met. And look, when Gysai was at LA Galaxy and he moved to Columbus Crew, the reason why he went from Galaxy to the Crew was because his last season with the Galaxy, it wasn't going well for him at all. And towards the end of last season for Columbus, it wasn't going great for Gysai in Columbus, and it continued to be the case this season for him in Columbus. And I think this is a move where it makes total sense. I believe I talked about this on the podcast maybe a few months ago, where there was rumors that Columbus would be open to a trade for Gysai. And I was like, okay, well, what team needs a striker? I mean, he's not going to go abroad. He's going to stay in America. And the number one team that I said made sense was the Colorado Rapids. They really haven't had a true number 9 for years. And now they get one in Gysai Zardes. They get a player that's going to be highly motivated because, look, I'm not saying he wasn't motivated at Columbus, but for whatever reason, it wasn't working out there. And you look at the way that Columbus is playing, it's a mess right now. And it's a little bit surprising that Caleb Porter is still the manager of the Columbus Crew, because no matter what formation they do, no matter who they play in what positions, they're not creating enough chances to put the ball in the back of the net. It didn't matter if it's Gysai. It doesn't matter if it was Miguel Berry. They can't put the ball in the back of the net. And I know when I had Jordan Angeli on the podcast, I was like, is that the number one concern right now for Columbus? Not having a striker? And she said, no, I don't think that's an issue and everything. And she might have said that because she really believes that, or she could have said it, because she didn't want to be on record saying, yeah, it's a problem for Columbus. And I do think it's a problem for Columbus. And getting rid of Gysai, you get some GAM that opens up a DP spot for Columbus. Now they can go out and get another number 9, which I've got to imagine that's what they're going to spend the DP spot on, is a number 9. And if you guys watched the game yesterday with Columbus, Lucas Zelarayan did not play in the game yesterday, and they weren't creating enough chances. And again, that's got to be a little bit of a concern for Columbus fans when Lucas Zelarayan, by far your best player, a top 5 player in MLS, when he's not out there, you saw how poor Columbus were against Sporting Kansas City. And it's tough right now for Columbus fans, I'm sure, sitting in 10th place, 8 games played so far, 2 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses, 10 goals scored for, 9 goals against, 9 points total so far this season. Yeah, it's not good enough. And you look, Columbus is up there high with XG. They're creating chances, but when Lucas Zelarayan doesn't play against Sporting Kansas City, they're not creating chances. They're just not putting the ball in the back of the net. And I think this is a deal that works out great for all parties involved, because now Gysai can get a fresh start in Colorado like he got in Columbus, moving from LA, like I mentioned. And maybe this is what he needs to convince Greg Berhalter, I should be one of the players that you bring to Qatar for the World Cup if he can find his feet, if he can start putting the ball in the back of the net. Because, look, you look at his time in Columbus, 54 goals and 110 appearances. That's great. He won the MLS Cup in 2020 with Columbus. They won the Champions Cup in 2021. He was the MLS Comeback Player of the Year in 2018. And so maybe something similar can happen for Gysai this time around when he moves to Colorado. I know last night he was on the bench, which was a little bit surprising. But, like I said earlier, they really haven't had a number 9 in years. And so now they get one in Gysai. He knows the league, who can put the ball in the back of the net. And maybe it's just a different system. Maybe it's different teammates that he needed. And like I said, I think this is a win-win for all parties involved. But moving on to another MLS team, focusing on Minnesota United. I feel so bad for this guy. Hassani Dotson, he has torn his right ACL, the club announced before they took on the Chicago Fire. He's played in all 7 games this season, started all 7 games. 1 goal, 2 assists. That's just a huge blow for Hassani, a guy who's played so well in the middle of the park for them, a guy who's so versatile. He can play in multiple positions. He was having a really, really good season for Minnesota United. And I don't know how many people, have paid attention to what Minnesota are doing since that first game the Union played them in. But they look a really good team. 4 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses. They beat Chicago Fire 3-0 at home. 11 goals for, 6 goals against. Yeah, Minnesota are playing really well on the season. And to lose a huge player like Hassani Dotson, it's a tough blow for Minnesota United. And I know they have a couple other midfielders. You have Will Trapp. You have Kevin Arriaga, who scored a goal yesterday against Chicago. He's having a great season as well. But having a player like Hassani Dotson who can play in multiple positions, like I said, a guy who's arguably having his best season ever for Minnesota United so far, now is going to miss the rest of the 2022 season. And, you see a ton of injuries, not only in MLS with ACL injuries, with hamstring injuries. And, the last couple of episodes, I talked a lot about the medical staff with Atlanta United. And thank goodness I have no news to talk about an injury to an Atlanta United player. But I do think we've seen a lot more injuries this season just in soccer in general. And I think maybe part of that is because the amount of games, the intensity of games that players are playing. I mean, they're not really getting rest. And, it's going to be a wear and tear on your body. And so you feel bad for Minnesota United losing a great player in Hassani Dotson. And you just don't like to see players get injured. And so, again, like I said, I feel bad for Minnesota United fans, a huge player that they're missing. And hopefully he can come back next season and pick off where he left off this season with Minnesota United. Moving on to the New England Revolution, they have announced they have signed Dylan Borrero, a young Colombian midfielder. He is coming from Brazilian side Atletico Mineiro, who have had a lot of players the last couple seasons picked up by MLS clubs, one of Brazil's top clubs, and they're losing a very, very promising player. He's only 20 years old. He is a very, very, very pacey outside midfielder. Bruce Arena called him very technical with the ball. I think this is a huge signing for New England Revolution. I mean, they're paying $4 million for him, which could raise to $4.5 million if certain incentives are met. And regardless of the price tag, this is the first time that the Revs have signed a U22 DP player. Like I said, he's a Colombian. He's 20 years old. He signed a 3-year contract with a 1-year club option. And Atletico Mineiro also have a 20% sell-on clause inserted into that deal, which, they're getting a ton of money up front for him right now. And you got to imagine if he impresses with New England, Atletico are going to see a lot more money coming their way. And especially if you look at the season last year that Djordje Buchanan had playing on the wing for the Revs, if Dylan can play similar to how Djordje played last season, his time in New England won't be that long if he has a similar season to what Djordje Buchanan had. Because, look, I think part of the reason why New England are struggling this season is, one, obviously the goalkeeping. Two, I don't know why you play Omar Gonzalez when his legs are clearly gone. But three, I don't think they have the pace, the width that they had last season with Djordje Buchanan out wide. That made a lot of difference. And I know they play a 4-4-2 diamond at times, but losing Djordje Buchanan was such a huge blow. And I know it's not like, oh, well, he got injured or anything. They chose to sell him. It was the perfect time to sell Djordje Buchanan. But getting a player in like Dylan who has pace, I think that's really going to do wonders for the Revs. And I know this happened a few weeks ago, I think it was. They signed Serbian goalkeeper Djordje Petrovic. So they do have their replacement lined up for Matt Turner. I know Brad Knighton's been playing horrible for the Revs, but they don't have any other better options. And so they'll have a goalkeeper joining them in the summertime. And like I said, they'll have a U22 player joining them here in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks. And that should boost things for the Revs, I think. Definitely not going the way that any of their fans would have hoped, especially after the season they had last season. But as Union fans, we love to see it, right? And the final bit of news I want to talk about is DC United firing Hernan Losada. This is a move that blows my mind because I remember going down to DC last year with DC United just all over the Union, absolutely destroy the Union down in DC. The Union were able to get all 3 points in Chester last year. If it wasn't for a rain delay, then maybe the Union wouldn't have got all 3 points, right? Because this game got interrupted. The Union were able to go into the locker room, clear their heads, because they weren't playing good up until that point. And they were able to get all 3 points after the rain delay, which thank goodness, I guess, for that. But Losada, I mean, after all those years of Benny ball, they finally looked like they were going in the right direction. To see what Hernan Losada was doing with Ben Olsen's players, they were 1 point out of missing out of the playoffs last season. And I know this season, DC were 2-4. They definitely shouldn't have been 2-4. Losada was able to bring in some more of his players for his system. And I know he's a high press manager a lot. We've seen, kind of the same thing with San Jose's ex-manager, Mateus Almeida. Can pressing managers last in this league with that kind of style they want to play? Are their rosters deep enough? I mean, the Union play a pressing system and it works out fine. The Red Bulls play a pressing system and it works out fine for them. So, I mean, I think it can work, but when managers, want to implement the system on day one and expect their system to be ingrained in these players within a week and they think everything's going to work out, it's hard. It's hard for those systems to work out right away. Trying to build something slowly should be the way that these managers do, but I get it. They have a system, they have a philosophy that worked with them previously, and they want to continue to use that in their new jobs. And, some players can adapt to it, some can. And you look, Losada was 17-5-19 in his year and a couple months in charge with DC United. I don't agree with this at all. I think he was a very, very exciting coach. I thought he had a case for manager of the season last year just for the way that he was able to turn around things so fast with DC United. And I know Julian Gretzel was on his podcast with Fabian Herbers saying, some players, it was hard to adapt to this system. Some players liked it. And, you're always going to get players like that where, some are okay with the pressing system. Some can't do it at all. And you see it with Manchester United with Ralph Ragnick, who's, the guy who started ganging pressing. And none of those players can adapt to that. And some players in DC couldn't adapt to the way that Hernan wanted to play, and some could. And you hear that there was friction in the locker room, and some players wanted him gone. And I do think players in today's game do have a little bit more power than what they should have. It's a joke, especially when you look at players running their contracts all the way down and then they're able to leave on a free. And now the clubs get nothing for those players. But that's a story for another day. But, at the end of the day, DC United had to do what they thought was best for them. And look, they get a 3-2 win last night against New England Revolution. And I know it's the Revs. The Revs haven't been playing great this season, like we just talked about a couple minutes ago. But, yeah, I still think they should have given Hernan a lot longer than a year and a couple months in charge. But let's go ahead and talk about our Philadelphia Union. And, right away, Jim Curtin said it in his press conference. He said, this was a boring game in the second half. And he's right. I thought about recording this podcast straight after the game, but I would have been running hot on this podcast. And I still am a little bit upset, like a lot of you guys, I'm sure, are. And I mean, this was, like I said in the intro, probably the worst game of the season so far for the Union. Yes, worse than that 1-1 draw against Minnesota at home. Worse than the game against Toronto. At least, the first game of the season against Minnesota, we were expecting the Union to start slow, not get a win, because the Union historically starts slow on opening day, start the MLS season slow. And I wasn't expecting a win against Minnesota. For the Union to get a draw against Minnesota, yeah, I thought it was a good result for them. But that game against Montreal last afternoon, it was terrible. And especially when you look, 4 shots total at home, only 2 of those shots on target. That's poor. That's piss poor. You expect the players to come back after a loss in Toronto. You expect them to come and play hard at home against Montreal. And every single player on the field, they looked out of sync with each other. It's terrible. I mean, maybe it's an overreaction for me. Maybe it's not. But that was one of the worst home performances for the Union that we have seen in the last couple years. And I know if it was reversed, if the Union would have got a point in Montreal and then they got 3 points against Montreal at home, 4 points, we would all be happy with that. But because it was reversed, 3 points in Montreal. We're like, oh, this is excellent. Nobody expected us to get 3 points in Montreal. Now you expect the Union to get 3 points at home against Montreal to get 6 points. And it doesn't happen. They drop points. You do feel a little bit disappointed. You feel like it's a loss. Maybe it's an overreaction. Maybe it's not. 4 points out of 6 against Montreal, that feels good, right? Because on the flip side of things, Montreal fans probably feel bad. Only 1 point against the Union on the season, it's not good enough. But for the Union to only have 4 shots total at home, that's unexcusable. And the Union, they should have killed this game off in the first half. They had an outstanding chance with Leon Floch in the 12th minute where he, overhit the pass a little bit, but, he had the opportunity to also shoot the ball himself. And the more I watched that clip this morning, Daniel Gysai plays an excellent through ball to split the 2 center backs for Montreal. Floch didn't hit the most horrible pass. Yes, it was mishit, and it was a little bit behind Mikael Uhre, but Mikael still could have tried to have got a foot to the ball. Jim Curtin, I'll play the clip here in a little bit, talks about how it should have been a tap-in, because it absolutely should have been a tap-in. We saw Julian Kranz's goal that he scored at him, the first goal, not the penalty kick, the first goal that he combined with Sergio Santos. That pass was behind him, and he still was able to get a foot on the ball and score against Charlotte. But Mikael jumps over the ball, doesn't even make a play. I don't know if he thought Julian was right behind him. That's why he jumped over it, but there was zero communication there on that play. And not even just that play. You saw it throughout the day. There was a lot of communication issues for the Union. You saw Jack Elliott and Kai Wagner run into each other in the first half. It's little things, little details that the Union can correct. You saw Corey Burke in the second half, who was really, really poor in the day. But this moment, he was so selfish. Didn't pass the ball to McGlynn, who was wide open on the left. Corey Burke had one guy defending him, and then he draws 2 more defenders to come on him. He has 3 defenders on him, which leaves Jack McGlynn wide open. He doesn't pass the ball. And I'm not saying Jack McGlynn would have scored that chance there, but you've got to play that pass. Again, that's a communication issue. That's a total lack of awareness from Corey Burke's part for not knowing that Jack McGlynn's right there to his left. He should be looking with his eyes, knowing that Jack McGlynn's right there. I don't know if Jack McGlynn's yelling, hey, Corey, I'm right here. But that ball should have went to Jack McGlynn, who should have had a shot, and it doesn't. And you look, when Corey Burke comes into this game, you bring him in for the physicality to win those 50-50 balls. And he doesn't do any of that. And his only shot in this game, he sends it off target. And the shot was so bad that it went all the way to the left side of the field for a Montreal throw-in. That was such a piss-poor shot by Corey Burke. And, I don't want to spend this episode, ragging on each and every player. I don't want to overreact, but, sometimes that's what happens when that game's that poor for the Union. He was on the field for 23 minutes, Corey Burke. And he only had 5 touches. He was a ghost out there. He offered absolutely nothing. It was like the Union were playing down a man because Corey Burke wasn't pressing the way he needed to. I know the Union eventually switched to, it looked like a 4-2-3-1 because Jack McGlynn was wanting to play as a second CDM. It could have also been the Christmas tree 4-3-2-1-2. I don't know. That formation was a little bit weird when they took off Mikael and brought on Paxton. I'm not really sure what the Union were trying to run. 4-2-3-1, 4-3-2-1 it looked like. But whatever it was, it did not work out. And Corey Burke, like I said, it was like the Union were playing with 10 men when he was out on the field. I know that's harsh, but it's what it looked like. It really did. And you saw Daniel Gazdag and Mikael Uhre's connection. It was way off yesterday. You have Mikael running away from the ball on multiple occasions. Gazdag's passes didn't look that bad because they were in the right channel. But Mikael and him, the communication was off. They weren't talking. And I know maybe some fans are starting to get a little bit worried that Mikel doesn't have a goal yet. But, I'm not calling him a bust. I'm not worried because if you remember in my season predictions, I said I don't expect Mikel to score a ton of goals this season as he needs to get used to the league and his teammates. And, I guess at the same time, too, there were moments in this game where he did look sluggish. And it's just really frustrating that him and Gazdag weren't on the same page. But, these are things that you can correct for sure. And it's not time to worry because you can see the quality is there. You can see he's a very strong player. He does have a good acceleration about him. He's got a really good touch on him. But, just communicating with your teammates, taking care of the little things. And that's something that the Union are going to have to work on for the rest of the season. And, if I was Jim, I'd probably bench Mikel against Nashville. I'd go with Sergio and Carranza up top if Sergio is healthy. And for people that missed it, Sergio Santos, the reason he wasn't on the bench yesterday was because, yet again, he pulled his hamstring. And I'll give my thoughts on that here in a little bit. But, yeah, I would bench Mikel because he has looked good coming off the bench. And maybe that's what he needs is to get his mind right, to clear his head and, let Sergio and Julian tire out defenses. And by doing that, then a lot of space, opportunities will open up for Mikel. But I know we're going down to Nashville and they play really good defense. So I think it's going to be a tough game for the Union to try to get in behind for Nashville. But we'll talk about that game midweek. But yeah, just wasn't good enough with communication, not just between Daniel and Mikel, the whole team. And Jim Curtin was asked after the game, so what are your thoughts on the Union just not creating enough chances? And this is what he had to say.
In the second half, too, we had a lot of really good entry balls into that green zone, which is the area in front of those center backs behind their number 6. And for whatever reason, sometimes the forward would run away from the ball. Sometimes it was maybe a pass that was behind a guy, but we were just a little bit off. But the amount of chances and balls that we had into the green zone, we have to generate more than the 4 shots today and 2 on goal. So things we need to work on are movement. Again, getting used to the timing of movement, the runs that we make. Sometimes it's in behind. Sometimes it's to come off the center backs to create a different situation. Sometimes we need to, create more layers of players, so not just all be in one straight line up on the front line. So a lot of little nuance that goes into it. But I think where we turned them over, the amount of times we had real good opportunities from 40 yards and in where it looked like their back 5 wasn't set up yet, we just weren't clean enough with those passes that should lead to opportunities at goal. They'd wind up, getting stolen or they'd have enough time to take a foul, and we never got into a good rhythm of really generating good offense. So, a lot to still work on in the attacking part of the field, like I said.
The Union didn't create enough chances. There wasn't any other clear-cut chances other than the penalty. It's like after they score that penalty kick, the offense just disappeared. And you look in the second half, so boring. Such a disappointing game from the Union. And we'll talk about the goal that they conceded to Kai Kamara here in a little bit. But, yeah, it's just really disappointing to see that the Union didn't play great. And then especially, all the long balls over the top that weren't working out. It's like, I know this is how the Union play. They play long balls over the top. But there comes a point where, time after time, if it's not working, then just stop playing these long balls. Like, switch it up. And that wasn't the case. And that's why you bring in Corey Burke to win those 50-50 balls. And like I said, he offered nothing. And going back to the Sergio Santos injury, it is what it is at this point, and it's really to be expected that Sergio is going to be injured every single year. And this happens a lot with explosive players, and they tend to get hamstring injuries because they're so fast, because they're generating so much power in their legs. And you tend to get muscle injuries like that. Maybe Sergio Santos needs to be in the ice baths a lot more. I don't know, right? It's disappointing. Hopefully he comes back. Hopefully he's available against Nashville, but none of this is Sergio's fault. there's just a time, where a player can only get injured so much before you cut them because they're injury prone. And it's not Sergio's issue. He wants to be out there, but he's so explosive that it's easier for him to get muscle injuries. And like I said, it is what it is. And we missed Sergio Santos yesterday. There's no denying that he's the fastest player on the team. He's the fastest player on the pitch every single time. His pace causes issues. Both Sergio and Corey's contracts are up after this season. And if I was Ernst Tanner, what I would do after the season is not resign Corey Burke. And it's not because Corey had a bad game. It's because you have Corey Burke's replacement with U2s and Jose Riasco. You give Sergio Santos a 1-year prove-it deal, and you go out and sign another striker, just like Sergio Santos, who's explosive, who has that pace, who is strong. And, whether that said player you bring in on a loan or a permanent deal, if said player isn't injury prone like Sergio Santos, then you got to keep him over Sergio, and you don't resign Sergio after the 2023 season. And if Sergio is healthy for the 2023 season, if he proves that, okay, all these injuries are behind me, well, I'd probably still let Sergio walk, especially if this said striker you're signing is healthy, is younger than Sergio Santos, and does everything that Sergio Santos does already. Then, yeah, you got to keep the younger guy over Sergio Santos. And I'm getting way ahead of myself talking about what the Union should do next season. But, it sucks when you can't rely on a player. He makes a difference for your team, but he's always injured. So that's what I would do if I was Ernst Tanner. I think a lot of you guys are probably getting fed up with the Sergio Santos injury history. And maybe a lot of you guys are like, yeah, just let him and Corey Burke both walk after the season and deal with it next season. But, I would bring Sergio back for a 1-year prove-it deal for the 2023 season. And we'll see what the Union do. We still got to get through the 2022 season. But the last thing I'll say about this game, my overall thoughts is, the referee, he made the whole game about himself with constantly blowing the whistle, killing any momentum in this game whatsoever. 27 fouls called in this game. It was a really, really boring game. And a lot of that is to do because of the referee. As soon as a Montreal player got touched, they'd go to the ground. Yeah, they went to the ground really easy. The ref maybe should have given yellow cards for simulation from the Montreal players. But yeah, a terrible performance from the referee on the day. Killed all momentum on the game. Definitely made the game about itself. And I don't like to complain about referees, but yeah, that was a really, really poor game from the center ref yesterday. And you can't blame the refs for the reason why the Union only got a point. The Union only got a point because of themselves. So, that's my thoughts on the game. My 3-star players for the Union. Number 3, really hard picking 3 players. 3 has to be Andre Blake. 2 saves. He saved a really clever free kick from Montreal. Number 2, Jose Martinez. 34 out of 43 accurate passes. 1 for 3 tackles, 1. 15 ball recoveries. 6 out of 9 ground duels, 1. 1 out of 5 long balls. And again, that 1 out of 5 long balls tells you the whole story. It wasn't just Jose Martinez playing bad long balls. It was this whole team. And like I said a few moments ago, you noticed that the long balls weren't working. So why not change up the way that you're going to go ahead and approach this game? 3 points were there for the taking, especially in the first half. And the Union just couldn't capitalize. And, definitely wasn't on Jose Martinez for not playing more accurate long balls. It's everything I just talked about. But on the day, yeah, I thought Jose Martinez had a really good game, protecting the back four, starting the attack. And number 1, Julian Kranza, 2 for 2 tackles, 1, 2 interceptions, 3 ball recoveries, 5 out of 9 ground duels, 1, 13 out of 18 completed passes. And this is exactly what you want out of your strikers. You want them to be able to link out well with their teammates to complete passes. To see Julian Kranza, I don't think we have a striker on this team that works as hard as he does defensively. And it's every single game. And to see him not afraid to draw contact, not afraid to foul players. And to see him put the ball in the back of the net. 3 goals so far for the Union, the most he's had in a single MLS season. He has tied his goal-scoring record in 2 seasons with Miami. I mean, what a signing this has been for the Union. And I hope at the end of the season that the Union do wind up making this deal permanent for Julian Carranza. I don't know what that fee is for the permanent deal for Julian Carranza. I can't imagine that it's anywhere close to the $6 million that Miami paid. But even if it is, I mean, if Julian continues to play the way that he's playing, then you've got to sign Julian Carranza, right? But Jim Curtin was asked, again, I feel like, every episode, every other episode, every press conference, Jim's always asked about Julian Carranza. It's because this guy's been impressing so much. And this is what Jim had to say after the game about Julian.
He's playing great for a 21-year-old kid. He's plays with real savvy. His movement in the box causes problems like you saw today. Drew a PK for us, had a couple other opportunities where he could have got a second goal. But overall, work rate-wise, really happy with Julian. He's done a good job for us, and he's only going to get better and better. And look, we're going to need probably, 2 to 3 guys be pushing for double digits in goals. That's going to be how we're going to do it. It's going to be by committee, and he's certainly on his way in a good spot right now and playing very well.
I think it's interesting there from Jim Curtin that he says we're going to need it to be by committee for strikers to get into double digits, and he said Julian Carranza is well on his way. He is. I think, again, just going back to my season predictions, I think I said Julian Carranza would be the leading goal scorer this season with 11. Yeah, for sure, Julian's going to go over 10 goals. And, I mean, how do you not sign this guy permanently for the way he's been playing for you so far this season? And that's one thing I think, even myself, I start forgetting, is that Julian is only 21 years old. We forget how young he is. And to see him play as well as he's been playing for the Union early on, what a signing it is, because I go back to when the Union announced this deal, and I'm sure you guys remember on social media too, a lot of fans complaining, why would you do this? Why would you get a player from Miami? This is a horrible signing. I can't believe this is this striker that the Union are bringing in. And we're all laughing about that now because Ernst Tenner, again, time after time, he proves he knows how to scout players. He knows what this team needs. And Julian Carranza has been such a great pickup for the Union, and he could go down as, the Young Player of the Year award if he continues to play the way he's been playing this season. So those are my 3-star players. I'm not going to break down the penalty kick that the Union scored with Carranza. What I will break down is the goal that I'm just calling him the Impact, Montreal scored with Kai Kamara. So all it takes is playing out of the back with Johnston. You have a ball played into Kyoto. A ball gets by Kai Wagner, who tries to stick a leg out there. So you have 2 strikers now on the field with Kai Kamara and Kyoto with Montreal. So that means Jack Elliott's going to go ahead and pick up Kyoto. Great ball by Alistair Johnston. Jack Elliott should have done a better job. He's just containing Kyoto out there on the wing. Should have closed down the ball a lot sooner than what he did. Should have stuck out a foot or something, and he doesn't do that. And as soon as Kyoto puts the cross in, one-time finish with Kai Kamara, who does an excellent job. This is poor awareness from Jacob Glesnes, because if you go ahead and watch this play, I don't know on the highlights how far back it goes and shows, but Kai Kamara here's in a 1v1 situation into Jacob Glesnes. Jacob Glesnes knows that, okay, Kyoto's there. Kai Kamara is there. So he expects Kai Kamara to run off his back and everything, and Jacob's fine with that because he's paying attention to the ball. He knows he's behind him. But at the last second, Kai Kamara goes from left to right. And it's that little movement right there that throws Jacob Glesnes off. And by the time that he does that, it's perfect execution because he knows that Kyoto's when he's going across the ball into the box. And as soon as Kai runs off of Jacob Glesnes' left shoulder to go right. Jacob Glesnes' beat. It's a perfectly timed run from him, perfectly timed cross, and nothing Andre Blake could have done there. It's just poor awareness from Jacob Glesnes. Jack Elliott should have closed down the ball a lot faster, should have got a foot into the ball. He's just containing. I guess he's expecting Jacob to, do well on a 1v1 situation against Kai Kamara. And it's just that little movement, that little run that Kai Kamara does off of Jacob Glesnes' shoulder and Jacob's speed. And after that, there was really no other chances from Montreal. They came and they got their point. They got the goal that they knew that they were probably going to get in this game. Because time after time, they score goals against the Union in Subaru Park. But real quick, let's go ahead and talk about Blunder of the Week. So I don't know if you guys watched any of the San Jose game versus Seattle Sounders, which San Jose came back and won that game 4-3. But the referee in this game versus Seattle, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Seattle, they get a penalty in the 10th minute. It is because Nathan, the center back who's finally back for San Jose, just his reckless 2-footed challenge into Raul Ruidiaz is should have been straight red card. They gave a penalty, obviously, but as soon as Ruidiaz cuts the ball to his right, Nathan's just going in, flying. It takes Ruidiaz completely out, and the referee sees it the whole time. It should have been straight red card, and the referee doesn't give a red card, gives a yellow card, and I just don't know how you don't give a red card for this reckless challenge. And I know we complain all the time for pro refs for being horrible, but this is as clear as day a red card. This is why you have VAR. The referee watches this play from start to finish, and he says, okay, yeah, it's a penalty, but no red card. So the referee in the San Jose-Seattle game gets Blunder of the Week. And so that'll pretty much do it for this episode this week, guys. Again, hopefully you guys have been enjoying the podcast so far this season. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying how the Union are playing. Even though they dropped points against Montreal and they should have got all 3 points in that game, should have killed the game off in the first half. I'm not panicking. The Union are still in first place in the Eastern Conference. Again, still undefeated at Subaru Park. Only one loss on the season. I don't think anybody could have predicted this is how the Union's season would have been going. But we all know they have a tough May schedule. The Union are going to have to pick up points, especially on the road, as they go to Nashville in their home opener at their brand new stadium. Hopefully the Union can get points down there. I know a lot of fans want to see the Union get all 3 points, but I'll talk about that game midweek, like I said. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, follow Free Kick Pod, where we get your podcast, The Free Kick. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy your Sunday. Hopefully the weather continues to get better. Hopefully you guys don't get sick, don't get a cold like I did last week. And yeah, hopefully you guys just enjoy the nice day out here Sunday. We finally got a good game, nice warm game yesterday against Montreal, and yeah, hopefully that's how the rest of the season's going to be. Hopefully we don't get a rainy game against New York Red Bulls when they come to town. But again, you guys enjoy your week. We'll talk about that Nashville game midweek. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.